Good evening, spooky people. I am so thrilled to be back today to talk yet again about Ed and Lorraine Warren, whose careers I've researched and read about for the better part of the last decade, and I love learning more about, whether it be cases that are lesser known or new details that I haven't heard about before. I'm your resident ooky spooky girl Alexa, and welcome to the top 5 scary Ed and Lorraine Warren found footage that will terrify you. In our 5th place position, we have my favorite creepy doll, Annabelle. Back when I was in high school, I actually got to portray her in a local haunted house, which was the beginning of my scare acting career. Hey, I promise I am quite terrifying if I want to be. I promise. For those of you who might be rolling their eyes right now, I'm going to refresh memories on the real Annabelle story. So feel free to cozy up and listen. Donna and Angie were student nurses and good friends who had decided to room together while in school. And for Donna's 28th birthday, her mom had gifted her a very large Raggedy Ann doll, something she was thrilled about. Personally, I'd react the same way. Let the record know that I'm always down to accept gifts of dolls or plushies. Soon after adopting the precious doll, Donna started to notice some weird behavior. She would leave Annabelle in her bed every morning behind her locked bedroom door, seating her the same way with her arms and legs crossed, and would come home at night to Annabelle having moved rooms and in positions that weren't possible. She's described a few instances of the doll kneeling, and speaking from experience, stuffed dolls can't kneel without falling for more than a few seconds. Donna and Angie then started finding notes left throughout the apartment, written on parchment paper in red pen, two things they didn't own. When Donna's boyfriend Lou started criticizing the doll, unexplainable handprints and scratches began appearing on his body. And that's when the girls made the decision to call a priest, who then brought in the Warrens. They were able to calm down the entity enough to remove it from the home and transport her to their museum, where she resides to this day. Now, the footage I'm talking about here is from the visitors who have visited Annabelle and her current residence over the years. If you look closely, you can just see the energy that's alive in her. Also, if she was never removed from her box until like the last few years, how is she able to change position ever so slightly from one video to the next? You tell me here. In 4th place, we have footage from a Buddhist exorcism. Known as parita, which can be translated as protection or safeguard, it refers to the Buddhist practice of reciting certain verses and scriptures in order to ward off misfortune or danger. The practice of reciting or listening to the parita suttas began very early in the history of Buddhism. The Mahavamsa contains the earliest historical reference to this practice, describing how Upatissa I instructed monks to recite the Ratana Sutta throughout the night during a period when Sri Lanka was afflicted by plague and diseases. In the Pali literature, these short verses are recommended by the Buddha as providing protection from certain afflictions. The belief in the effective power to heal or protect of the Sakakariya, or asseveration of something quite true, is an aspect of the work ascribed to the parita. It is also widely believed that all-night recitations of parita by monks bring safety, peace, and well-being to a community. Parita discourses can be recited at events like a funeral or on the death anniversary of a loved one, and can also be recited to placate antagonistic spirits. In 1987, Ed and Lorraine took a trip to Japan to offer their expertise in some cases that were ongoing in different parts of the country, with one of their stops being to a Buddhist temple. Describing everyone they encountered as lovely, Ed and Lorraine were shocked when they came upon not one, but 2 people under possession. Ed described one as being under the influence of a snake demon, as they slithered around the floor constantly with their tongue darting in and out of their mouth. The possessed people were blindfolded, so the demons couldn't witness the rites, as the Buddhas went through the rituals and chanted around them. After the spirits were cast out, a bonfire was built to help guide them towards the afterlife. The footage we see is from a later round of prayers, which was held because one of the sets of spirits refused initially to depart from her attached soul. You can hear Lorraine attempting to guide the spirit out with the aid of a translator, coaxing Teresa to go on to the light and fly away, that her family was no longer here. In 3rd place, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon afterwards. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out. While others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. You tell me which one you believe. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Thank goodness I'm not wearing white today. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which, hey, my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over, while others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, my favorite color, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that had made the hair on his arm stand up at a close distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with, you guessed it, long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brakes, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman. Glenn is quoted as saying, "There was no red bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing." Located in Connecticut, Lorraine used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the white lady on camera on September 1st, 1990 at 2:40 a.m., his 7th night in a row of filming at the cemetery, determined to have footage as proof, and we can show some of that footage to you now. He described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he said were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. In second place, we have the Amityville Horror. On November 13th of 1974, Ronald DeFeo Sr., his wife, and 4 of their offspring, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John, had their lives ended by a firearm inside their home in suburban Amityville, New York. And at the time, homicide detectives claimed it was the largest number of victims in a single slaying on Long Island. The deceased were found in their nightclothes and were shot in the back, apparently while they were asleep. There were no signs of a struggle inside the home, where a sign hanging outside the main entrance read, "High hopes." Sure. The killings were reported by the only surviving member of the family, the oldest son, Ronald. He told the police that he arrived at the home shortly after 6 p.m. but found the front door locked, so he crawled into the house through a window and stumbled across the icky scene. He later confessed that he had ended the lives of his family around 3:30 a.m., acting out the scenes for detectives as he described how he took out his family one by one, with the weapon eventually being found in Amityville Creek. Ronald's trial began in October of 1975. His defense attorney, William Weber, tried to make a case that the defendant, who allegedly heard voices, was innocent by reason of insanity, but the court eventually sentenced him to 6 concurrent 25-year to life sentences. Try saying that 5 times fast. Eesh. A year later, the Lutz family moved into the now abandoned home, and that's where this goes from simply tragic to much, much more. Most of the DeFeo family's furniture was still in the house, because it was included for $400 as part of the deal. You know what, I'd take that deal too. A friend of George Lutz, the father of the family, had learned about the history of the house and insisted on having it blessed, and at the time, George was a non-practicing Methodist and had no experience of what this would entail. Kathy, the mom, was a non-practicing Catholic and explained the process to him. George knew a Catholic priest named Father Mancuso who agreed to carry out the house blessing. He arrived to perform the blessing while George and Kathy were unpacking their belongings on the afternoon of December 18th, 1975, and went into the home to carry out the rites. When he flicked the first amount of holy water and began to pray, he heard a masculine voice demand that he get out. When leaving the house, the priest did not mention this incident to either George or Kathy until December 24th, when he called George and advised him to stay out of the second-floor room where he had heard the mysterious voice, which happened to be the former bedroom of Mark and John DeFeo that Kathy had planned to use as a sewing room, but the call was cut short by static. Following his visit to the house, the father allegedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands, similar to stigmata. At first, George and Kathy experienced nothing unusual in the house, but the horrors that happened over the next 28 days were awful for the Lutz family, bearing witness to slime pouring out of their walls, strange odors throughout the home, and George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which is right around the time Ron DeFeo carried out his original crimes. A garage door would open and close on its own, an invisible spirit knocked a knife down in the kitchen, a pig-like creature with red eyes was reported staring at George and his son Daniel through a window. Also, Kathy and 2 of her children experienced bouts of levitation while trying to sleep. The footage we have from this heinous month is of a boy with glowing eyes, believed to be the spirit of the late John DeFeo. By mid-January of 1976, after another attempt at a house blessing by George and Kathy, they experienced what would be their final night in the house. Now, the Lutzes were never able to give a full account of the events that took place on this occasion, describing them as too frightening. After getting in touch with Father Mancuso, the Lutzes decided to take some belongings and stay at Kathy's mother's house in nearby Deer Park, New York, until they had sorted out the problems with the house. They claimed the phenomena followed them there, describing greenish-black slime coming up the staircase towards them. Yeah, no thanks. And finally, in first place, we have footage of an American exorcism. While the video is blurred out on YouTube to protect the identity of the poor girl, I personally think it's up there as one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. At an hour and 20 minutes long, it depicts a Catholic bishop in Connecticut attempting to converse with a demonic entity that has possessed the body of an innocent young woman, while her family restrains her. Ed and Lorraine were the ones to alert the church to the possession after meeting her during an audience chat session that was held at the conclusion of one of their public presentations. During portions of the exorcism when prayer is done, you can hear the demon acting wildly, and it originally refuses to give its name, both of which are quite common in cases of demonic possession. Eventually we learn that there are 4 demons possessing our victim, with one of them identifying themselves as Robert, which happens to be a name associated with the son of Satan. I'll let a snippet roll now, allowing you to hear the woman for yourself. And that's the end of this list, bringing me to my regular motto: don't mess with spirits, don't mess with Ouija boards, and for the love of everything, let demons be. Trust me, I love spooky things and reading spooky stories, but it's so not worth it to bring that kind of hell into your life. Random human beings are scary enough as it is. Let me know in the comments about any demonic events that might have happened in your life. And don't forget to like and hit the bell for more nightmarish content from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos.